How to reprogram your subconscious mind while you sleep. There's one truth about sleep that almost nobody talks about. You do not stop learning when you fall asleep. In fact, some of the deepest learning your brain ever does happens after your eyes close. While you believe you are resting, your mind is still working. It is sorting memories, strengthening habits, connecting ideas, repeating emotional patterns, and quietly deciding what version of you will wake up tomorrow. Most people spend their entire lives believing that change only happens while they are awake. They think transformation comes from working harder, reading more books, watching more motivational videos, trying one new habit after another, but every morning they wake up as the exact same person they were yesterday. Not because they lack discipline, not because they lack intelligence, but because the part of the mind that truly governs behavior was never invited into the process. That part is your subconscious mind. Think about that for a moment. Almost everything you do each day happens without conscious effort. You do not think about how to walk. You do not consciously remember how to tie your shoes. You do not carefully decide every emotional reaction before it appears. When someone criticizes you, your response arrives before logic. When you feel anxious, the feeling often comes before the thought. When you procrastinate, you usually know exactly what you should be doing, yet somehow you still avoid it. It feels almost automatic, because it is. Your subconscious mind is running thousands of invisible programs every single day. Programs built from repetition, experience, emotion, environment, and beliefs you may have accepted years ago, without even realizing it. Here is what makes this so fascinating. The subconscious mind does not argue. It does not debate. It does not stop to ask whether a belief is useful. Its job is much simpler than that. Its job is to repeat. Whatever has been practiced often enough becomes familiar, and whatever becomes familiar feels true, even when it is not. That is why one person naturally believes opportunities are everywhere, while another expects disappointment before anything has even happened. One person walks into a room expecting respect. Another walks into the same room expecting rejection. Neither consciously chose those expectations. Their subconscious simply followed the script it had learned. This explains something that confuses millions of people. Why do good intentions disappear so quickly? Why can someone be deeply motivated on Monday, yet completely discouraged by Thursday? Why do people promise themselves, this time will be different, only to repeat the same habits again and again? Because motivation speaks to the conscious mind. Habits belong to the subconscious, and habits almost always win. Imagine trying to steer a massive ship across the ocean. The small wheel in your hands represents your conscious mind, your decisions, your goals, your dreams. But beneath the surface, an enormous engine powers the ship. That engine is your subconscious. If the engine continues pushing the old direction, turning the wheel alone changes very little. Eventually, the ship returns to the same course. Most people spend years turning the wheel without ever realizing the engine has been moving them somewhere else all along. Now here is the encouraging part. The subconscious is not your enemy. It has never been working against you. It has only been protecting what it believes is familiar. Even your fears were once learned as forms of protection. Even your self-doubt may have begun as a way to avoid disappointment. Even perfection, not because of magic, but because the brain continues organizing and strengthening recent experiences while you sleep. Have you ever noticed something strange? Sometimes you struggle with a difficult problem all day. Nothing makes sense. You finally give up. You sleep. Then somehow, the answer appears the next morning. You did not consciously solve it. Your sleeping brain continued working. Researchers have observed this effect repeatedly. Sleep is not simply recovery. It is active mental organization. The mind keeps sorting information, building connections, and strengthening what it believes matters most. Now imagine using that natural process intentionally. Instead of ending each day with fear, you end it with clarity. Instead of replaying failure, you rehearse confidence. Instead of feeding anxiety, you feed possibility. Not pretending, not denying reality. Simply choosing what you repeatedly place before the subconscious mind, night after night, week after week, month after month. Small changes, repeated consistently, become powerful internal programming. This audiobook is not asking you to believe impossible claims. You will not hear promises that one night changes everything. You will not be told that positive thinking alone solves every problem. Real growth is rarely dramatic. Real growth is usually quiet, invisible, almost boring, until one day you notice that you respond differently. You think differently. You make better decisions without forcing yourself. People begin asking what changed, yet you struggle to explain it, because the transformation happened beneath conscious awareness long before it became visible. There is something deeply comforting about this. You do not have to become someone completely different. You do not need to erase your personality. You do not need endless willpower. You simply need better internal repetition. The subconscious becomes what it repeatedly experiences, not occasionally, repeatedly. This is why small nightly rituals often matter more than occasional bursts of inspiration. Perhaps you have spent years trying to fix your life from the outside. A new planner, a new routine, another productivity system, another motivational speech, another promise that Monday will be different. There is nothing wrong with these tools, but they cannot replace inner programming. If your subconscious still believes, I never finish what I start, it quietly searches for evidence to support that belief. If it believes, I am capable of learning anything, it begins noticing opportunities instead. The outside world often reflects conversations happening silently inside. Carl Jung once suggested that until we make the unconscious conscious, it directs our lives, and we call it fate. Think carefully about those words. How many decisions have you blamed on luck when they were actually habits? How many missed opportunities were really unconscious fears? How many relationships followed the same painful pattern, not because destiny demanded it, but because the subconscious repeated what felt familiar? Awareness changes everything. The moment you see the pattern, you are no longer trapped inside it. Joseph Murphy devoted much of his life's work to explaining that the subconscious faithfully accepts what we repeatedly impress upon it. Whether we repeat fear or confidence, scarcity or abundance, hopelessness or possibility, the subconscious quietly goes to work, not because it judges, but because repetition becomes instruction. This audiobook builds upon that timeless insight, while grounding every lesson in practical daily action, because knowledge without practice changes nothing. You may be wondering, how long does this take? The honest answer, it depends. Some shifts happen surprisingly quickly. Others require patience. But remember, you did not build your current subconscious patterns in a week. Many were formed over years, perhaps decades. So be patient with yourself. By the time you finish this audiobook, you will begin looking at sleep differently, not as wasted hours, not as empty time, but as one of the greatest opportunities for quiet personal growth. Every evening will become a doorway, a chance to gently guide your mind. Instead of leaving it to repeat yesterday by default, you will learn practical ways to prepare your mind before bed, how to replace limiting mental scripts, how to work with repetition rather than against it, why emotion matters more than empty words, how habits are strengthened, and why your mornings often begin the night before. None of these ideas require extraordinary intelligence. None require expensive courses. None require special talents. Only awareness, consistency, patience, and a willingness to stop living on mental autopilot. Because the greatest changes rarely begin with dramatic action. They begin with quiet choices, repeated faithfully when nobody is watching, even while you sleep. Tonight, before your head touches the pillow, you may think differently than you ever have before. You may realize that your final thoughts are not simply ending the day. They are preparing tomorrow. That realization alone has the power to change far more than you imagine. So, take a slow breath. Leave behind everything you thought you knew about sleep. Open your mind to a different possibility, because the journey toward changing your life may begin at the exact moment you close your eyes. And it all starts with one simple question. What has your subconscious been learning every night? Without your permission, let's begin with Chapter 1, The Hidden Night Shift, What Your Brain is Really Doing While You Sleep. Chapter 1, The Hidden Night Shift, What Your Brain is Really Doing While You Sleep. Every night, something remarkable happens. You disappear from the world. Your phone grows silent. The conversations stop. Your responsibilities wait until morning. Your eyes close, and it feels as though everything inside you does the same. But it doesn't. In many ways, the most important work of your day begins only after you stop paying attention. While your body lies still, your mind becomes incredibly busy, not with random thoughts, not with meaningless dreams, but with something much more important. It begins deciding what deserves to stay and what deserves to disappear. That single idea changes the way you see sleep forever, because if your brain is deciding what to keep, then every day you are giving it material to choose from. The question is, what have you been handing it? Imagine walking into an enormous library every evening carrying a backpack. Inside that backpack is everything that happened during your day. Every conversation, every mistake, every compliment, every fear, every disappointment, every joyful moment, every worry that kept replaying inside your head. You quietly place the backpack on the floor. Then while you sleep, an invisible librarian begins opening it, one memory at a time. Some memories are carefully placed onto permanent shelves. Others are quietly thrown away. Some emotions become stronger. Others slowly fade. Some experiences become lessons. Others become habits. You never meet this librarian. You never tell it what to keep. Yet every morning, your backpack feels lighter, and your mind feels slightly different. Not because life changed overnight, but because something inside you organized yesterday into tomorrow. This happens every single night, whether you notice it or not. That means your sleeping mind is never passive. It is always editing, always arranging, always deciding. And here is what most people never realize. The mind gives special attention to whatever felt most important before you fell asleep. Think back to nights when you went to bed angry. Did the feeling completely disappear by morning? Probably not. Sometimes it became even stronger. The conversation replayed itself. You imagined different answers. You woke up still carrying the emotion. Now think about nights when you ended the day feeling deeply grateful. Perhaps after spending time with someone you love, or after solving a difficult problem. You often woke with a quiet sense of peace. The difference wasn't only what happened. It was what your mind continued carrying after you stopped consciously thinking. Your subconscious is like fertile soil. It doesn't argue with the seed. It simply grows whatever is planted often enough. If seeds of fear are scattered every evening, fear slowly becomes familiar. If seeds of confidence are planted consistently, confidence begins growing beneath the surface. Notice something important. The soil doesn't judge the seed. It doesn't decide that one deserves to grow more than another. It simply responds to repetition. The subconscious behaves much the same way. It responds less to what you occasionally think, and far more to what you repeatedly experience. This explains why changing your life can sometimes feel strangely difficult. You decide to become healthier. You buy new shoes. You promise yourself tomorrow will be different. The first few days feel exciting. Then something happens. The excitement fades. Old habits quietly return, not because your goal was wrong, but because your subconscious still believes your old identity. Deep inside, it still whispers, "This isn't who we are." Without realizing it, you begin acting in ways that match that old story. Imagine wearing the wrong prescription glasses. At first, everything feels slightly blurry. You assume the world is the problem. You squint harder. You move closer. You blame the lighting. But none of those actions solve the real issue. The lens is creating the distortion. Your subconscious works like that invisible lens. It shapes how you interpret everything. Two people can experience the exact same situation. One sees opportunity. The other sees rejection. One hears constructive advice. The other hears criticism. One mistake becomes a lesson. Another mistake becomes proof of failure. The event remained the same. Only the subconscious lens changed. Perhaps you met someone who walks into every room expecting people to dislike them. They haven't spoken yet. Nobody has judged them. Nothing bad has happened. Yet they already feel uncomfortable. Then something fascinating occurs. Because they expect rejection, they become quiet. Because they become quiet, others speak to them less. Because others speak less, they conclude they were right all along. I knew people wouldn't like me. Was that reality? Or was it a subconscious expectation quietly creating the experience it feared? The mind often looks for evidence to support the stories it already believes. Now imagine someone else entering the same room. They smile naturally. They assume people are friendly. They ask questions. They listen carefully. Soon conversations begin flowing. At the end of the evening, they leave convinced people are kind. Two different experiences. Same room, same people, different subconscious programs. That should make you pause. Because it suggests your experiences are shaped not only by the world around you, but also by the invisible expectations you carry into it. The strange thing is, most subconscious beliefs were never consciously chosen. No child decides, I want to fear failure. No child dreams of believing, I'm not good enough. These beliefs are often collected quietly. A disappointed teacher, an impatient parent, one embarrassing moment, one painful rejection, one careless sentence spoken years ago. The conscious mind forgets. The subconscious remembers. Not because it wants to hurt you, because it wants to protect you from experiencing that pain again. Imagine touching a hot stove as a child. You learn instantly. You don't need daily reminders. The lesson becomes automatic. Your subconscious says, never do that again. That automatic learning keeps you safe. But emotional experiences work similarly. If speaking confidently once led to embarrassment, your subconscious may quietly connect confidence with danger. Years later, you wonder why public speaking feels terrifying. The original memory may be gone. The emotional program remains. This is why arguing with yourself rarely works. You can stand in front of a mirror repeating, I am confident. But if your subconscious still associates confidence with emotional danger, those words feel empty, like trying to paint over a crack wall. The color changes. The foundation doesn't. Real change happens deeper, not through force, but through repeated emotional experience. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. The first attempts required complete concentration. Every movement demanded attention. Balance felt impossible. Then something interesting happened. After enough repetition, the skill disappeared into your subconscious. Years later, you climb onto a bicycle. Within moments, your body remembers. You aren't consciously calculating balance anymore. The subconscious quietly performs the task. Imagine if confidence, patience, calmness, or discipline could become just as automatic. That possibility is far more realistic than most people imagine. Every habit begins as something difficult, then becomes something familiar. Eventually, it becomes something invisible. You no longer notice yourself brushing your teeth, locking your front door, checking your phone, driving familiar roads. Automatic behavior saves enormous mental energy. The subconscious loves efficiency. Whenever it notices repetition, it creates shortcuts. Those shortcuts become habits. The problem, it cannot tell the difference between habits helping you and habits limiting you. Suppose someone spends years worrying before every important event, before every meeting. They imagine failure. Before every interview, they expect rejection. Before every conversation, they rehearse embarrassment. Eventually, their subconscious stops asking permission. Anxiety becomes automatic, not because anxiety is their personality, but because repetition quietly built a shortcut. The same process can build courage, or patience, or self-respect. The mechanism never changed. Only the direction did. This is where sleep quietly enters the story, because every evening, the subconscious remains open to organizing everything you repeated throughout the day. Think of it like wet cement. While it's fresh, small impressions leave lasting marks. Once hardened, the marks become difficult to erase. Your moments before sleep are often softer than you realize. The noise of the day begins fading. The conscious mind relaxes. The subconscious becomes more receptive to emotional impressions, not magical, simply natural. This explains why your bedtime matters far more than your bedtime routine alone. Many people focus on herbal tea, soft lighting, comfortable pillows. Those things certainly help the body relax. But what about the final conversation happening inside your own mind? That conversation often matters even more. Are you replaying regret? Comparing yourself with others? Mentally arguing with someone who isn't even... Chapter 2. The language your subconscious actually understands. If your subconscious could speak, what language would it use? Most people immediately think words, positive words, negative words, encouraging words, critical words. But words are only a small part of the story. Your subconscious is listening to something much quieter, something you rarely notice. It pays attention to patterns, not promises. That changes everything. Because every January, millions of people promise themselves they will become healthier, more disciplined, more confident, more successful. Their words sound convincing, even sincere. Yet a few weeks later, most of those promises have disappeared. The subconscious wasn't rejecting their goals. It simply believed something else, not because of what they said, but because of what they repeatedly did. Imagine meeting someone who tells you every day, "I'm a very honest person." Then, each time you meet them, they exaggerate. They hide small truths. They make excuses. Eventually, you stop listening to what they say. You begin trusting what they consistently do. Your subconscious works in exactly the same way. It treats your actions as evidence. Your behavior becomes your testimony. Every repeated action whispers, "This is who we are," and the subconscious quietly agrees. Think about someone who says, "I value my health," yet every evening they ignore exhaustion, skip movement, eat simply because they feel stressed. Their conscious mind believes health matters, but the subconscious receives a different message. It doesn't hear, "Health is important." It hears, "Stress decides what we do." After enough repetition, stress becomes the authority, not intention. This is why small actions often carry enormous psychological weight. Making your bed, closing the laptop when you plan to, taking a short walk instead of endlessly scrolling. None of these actions dramatically change your life overnight, but each one sends a quiet message. I keep promises to myself. That message is surprisingly powerful because the subconscious is constantly asking one question: what kind of person keeps repeating this? Not, what kind of person hopes for something? Many people underestimate how often they are teaching themselves, not through books, not through conversations, but through repetition. Every time you delay something important, you rehearse delay. Every time you avoid an uncomfortable conversation, you rehearse avoidance. Every time you speak kindly to yourself after making a mistake, you rehearse resilience. Life is always becoming practice for something. The only question is, for what? Imagine a pianist. The audience sees beautiful music. They don't see thousands of quiet repetitions. One note, then another, one mistake corrected, then repeated correctly. Eventually, the fingers stop asking permission. They simply know where to go. Confidence often develops the same way. People assume confident individuals were born differently. More often, they have simply repeated different emotional responses. Enough times that calmness became familiar. There's another language your subconscious understands: emotion. In fact, emotion is often louder than words. Suppose someone repeats every evening, "I am safe," but while saying it, their body is filled with panic. Their breathing is shallow. Their muscles remain tense. Their mind keeps scanning for danger. Which message reaches the subconscious? Usually, the emotional one, because emotion tells the subconscious, "This matters." Strong emotion acts like a highlighter across the page of your experience. It quietly says, Remember this. Think about your childhood. You probably don't remember every ordinary Tuesday. You don't remember every breakfast or every walk to school, but you remember moments filled with emotion. A birthday surprise, a painful embarrassment, a proud achievement, a frightening experience. Emotion preserved those memories, not because they lasted longer, but because they mattered more. Your subconscious continues working this way throughout your life. This explains something fascinating. Two people can experience exactly the same setback. One quietly says, "That didn't work." The other says, "I always fail." The event lasted minutes. The interpretation may last years. The subconscious isn't storing only what happened. It is storing what the event meant, meaning the subconscious constantly performs this filtering. It decides what deserves your awareness. That means what you repeatedly focus on today. It will be easier to notice tomorrow, which means your attention quietly creates the world you experience, not the entire world, but the part your mind keeps bringing into view. This is why comparison can become so dangerous. Someone spends hours each evening looking at carefully edited versions of other people's lives. Slowly, their subconscious builds a new expectation. My life is enough. Nothing about reality changed. Only attention changed. Yet emotional experience follows. Comparison rarely steals happiness all at once. It steals it one unnoticed evening at a time. Now imagine replacing comparison with observation. Instead of asking, "Why am I behind?" you ask, "What am I practicing?" That question changes everything, because every repeated behavior becomes rehearsal. Every repeated emotional response becomes training. Every repeated thought becomes a path that grows easier to follow, whether you intended it or not. There is something deeply freeing about this. It means you don't have to fight every negative thought. You don't have to panic because fear appeared, or doubt, or frustration. Those thoughts visiting your mind do not define you. The subconscious pays much closer attention to what stays than to what briefly knocks on the door. A passing cloud doesn't change the sky. Repeated weather does. Think of a garden again. Weeds appear naturally. No gardener feels shocked by that. The difference is what receives consistent care. The gardener waters flowers, pulls weeds, returns tomorrow. Not because weeds never return, but because direction matters more than perfection. The subconscious grows whatever receives patient attention. Perhaps this is why lasting peace feels so different from temporary excitement. Excitement depends on circumstances. Peace often depends on repetition, repeated breathing, repeated perspective, repeated self-respect, repeated choices aligned with the person you hope to become. None dramatic, all powerful. Now the question becomes, how do you speak this language intentionally? How do you communicate with your subconscious without forcing it, without pretending, without fighting yourself? The answer begins somewhere surprisingly ordinary, not during sleep itself, but during the final moments before sleep. Those quiet minutes are unlike any other part of your day. Your responsibilities begin fading. The outside world grows quieter. Your analytical mind slowly loosens its grip. The doorway between conscious intention and subconscious processing begins opening. Most people walk through that doorway carrying worry, regret, comparison, mental noise, without realizing they are delivering instructions for the night ahead. But what if those final minutes could become something entirely different? What if they could become the most important conversation you ever have with yourself? Because there is a simple nightly ritual, so ordinary that most people overlook it, yet so powerful that it can quietly reshape the direction of your subconscious, one evening at a time. And that is exactly where our journey leads next. Chapter 3. The last 10 minutes before sleep, where tomorrow quietly begins. There is a moment every evening that most people never notice, not because it is hidden, because it feels ordinary. It arrives after the conversations have ended, after the dishes are washed, after the final notification appears on your phone, after you decide, "I'm going to bed." It lasts only a few minutes, sometimes less than 10. Yet those quiet minutes often shape the emotional direction of tomorrow more than the entire day that came before. Most people spend them without intention, and that may be one of the greatest missed opportunities of modern life. Think about airports for a moment. Before an airplane ever leaves the ground, dozens of tiny decisions are made. Its destination is entered, its route is confirmed, its fuel is checked, its direction is set. Once the plane lifts into the sky, changing course becomes much more difficult. Your mind works in a surprisingly similar way. The final minutes before sleep are like entering tomorrow's destination into the system. The journey hasn't started yet, but the direction already has. Many people believe tomorrow begins when the alarm clock rings. In reality, tomorrow often begins the night before, not because the future is being predicted, but because your inner world is already preparing for it. If your final moments are filled with panic, tomorrow often begins with tension. If they are filled with endless comparison, tomorrow begins with quiet dissatisfaction. If they are filled with purpose, tomorrow often opens with a greater sense of clarity. Nothing mystical is happening. The mind is simply continuing the emotional direction it was already traveling. Imagine pouring colored ink into a clear glass of water. At first, only a small swirl appears, but leave the glass untouched, and the color slowly spreads through every corner. Your last thoughts before sleep behave much the same way. One small emotional color, given enough quiet, can slowly spread across your internal world. That is why one unresolved argument can follow you into the next morning, and one moment of peace can do the same. Have you ever gone to bed worrying about something you cannot control? Perhaps an interview, an important exam, a difficult conversation, waiting for the next day. You lay in bed, replaying every possible outcome, trying to solve tomorrow before it arrived. Yet nothing changed. Morning came anyway. The interview still happened. The conversation still arrived. But something else happened too. You woke already exhausted, not because yesterday was difficult, because your mind spent the night carrying a weight it could never actually lift. The subconscious does not distinguish between productive preparation and endless mental rehearsal. If you keep replaying the same fearful scene, it quietly assumes, this must be important. So it keeps returning to it, again and again, like someone repeatedly opening the same unfinished letter, hoping the ending will somehow change. It never does, not until you choose to close it. This is why unfinished thoughts have such strange power. Imagine reading a mystery novel. Just as you reach the final chapter, someone removes the book. Your mind immediately wants the ending. It keeps wondering, keeps imagining, keeps returning. The subconscious behaves similarly with unfinished emotional experiences. When something feels unresolved, it naturally notices the difference. One question creates shame. The other creates growth. The subconscious listens carefully to questions, because questions determine where attention travels. Questions are far more powerful than most people realize. If every evening you ask, "What's wrong with me?" your mind immediately begins searching for answers. It remembers failures, embarrassing moments, missed opportunities. Soon, you have collected convincing evidence, not because your life is objectively terrible, because you instructed your mind where to look. Now ask something different. What did I handle better today than yesterday? Suddenly, different memories appear, different emotions, different evidence. The world outside remained exactly the same. The search inside changed completely. Think of your mind as a skilled detective. Whatever question you give it, it starts investigating. Ask, why does nothing ever work out? The detective works all night gathering proof. Ask, where have I been stronger than I realized? The investigation changes. The evidence changes. Eventually, the conclusions change. The subconscious follows the trail your questions create, not because it prefers optimism, because it prefers consistency. There is another quiet habit many people never notice, the habit of emotional leftovers. Imagine cooking dinner every evening. Instead of washing the dishes, you simply leave them in the sink. Tomorrow, you add more. Soon, the kitchen becomes difficult to use. Not because today's meal created the mess, because yesterday's mess remained. Emotions work similarly. Ignored frustration rarely disappears. Unspoken disappointment quietly accumulates. Tiny resentments stack themselves one upon another. Then one small inconvenience arrives, and suddenly you explode. You assume today's event caused a reaction. Often, it simply became the final plate in an already overflowing sink. Your bedtime offers something incredibly valuable, a chance to wash the emotional dishes, not by pretending nothing happened, but by refusing to carry everything into tomorrow. Some things deserve another day of attention, others deserve release. Knowing the difference is a quiet form of wisdom. Consider a traveler preparing for a long journey. Would they carry every object they own, every old receipt, every broken tool, every unnecessary stone? Of course not. The weight alone would make walking impossible. Yet emotionally, many people attempt exactly that. They carry old criticism, old guilt, old conversations, old identities, old fears, not because they enjoy suffering, because no one taught them they were allowed to unpack. There is something almost sacred about deciding, this does not need to follow me into tomorrow. Notice, that sentence does not deny the experience. It simply refuses to give it permanent residence. Some emotions are visitors, not lifelong roommates. Learning that distinction changes the atmosphere of your inner world. Have you ever noticed how children often fall asleep? An argument happens. 5 minutes later, they are laughing again. Soon after, they are peacefully asleep. Adults often do the opposite. The argument ends externally. Internally, it continues for hours, sometimes days, sometimes years. Growing older gave us knowledge, but sometimes it also made us experts at carrying things we no longer need. This doesn't mean ignoring pain. Pain deserves honesty. Grief deserves time. Loss deserves compassion. But replaying pain and processing pain are not the same thing. One slowly heals. The other slowly hardens. Your subconscious responds very differently to each. Healing says, we experienced something difficult. Rumination says, this difficult thing is who we are. Those are entirely different messages. Now think about the final object most people look at before closing their eyes. A glowing screen, hundreds of images, breaking news, arguments between strangers, perfectly edited lives. One more video, one more headline, one more scroll. The body lies in bed. The mind remains standing in a crowded marketplace. No wonder peaceful sleep feels distant. The subconscious spends its final waking moments absorbing noise instead of clarity. Imagine inviting 50 strangers into your bedroom every night. Each one speaks at once. One predicts disaster. Another sells something. Another complains. Another compares. Another demands attention. You would never willingly create that environment. Yet endless digital stimulation often does exactly that. Not because technology is evil, because your subconscious never received the silence it needed to organize the day. Silence is not empty. Silence is where the mind begins arranging itself. It is like allowing muddy water to sit undisturbed. Keep shaking the jar, and the water remains cloudy. Leave it alone. The dirt slowly settles. Clarity was always possible. Stillness simply made it visible. Many people fear silence because silence introduces them to themselves. Without music, without scrolling, without conversation, their own thoughts finally become audible. At first, that can feel uncomfortable. Old worries appear. Forgotten emotions return. Restlessness becomes obvious. But that discomfort is not failure. It is awareness. You cannot gently reshape a room while refusing to turn on the light. The final 10 minutes before sleep are less about doing and more about allowing the day to settle, allowing unnecessary tension to soften, allowing gratitude to appear naturally instead of being forced, allowing tomorrow to remain tomorrow. There is enormous strength in not demanding one more answer before bed. Some questions become wiser after rest. Perhaps that is one of the hidden gifts of sleep. It reminds us that not everything must be solved immediately. Some problems improve after distance. Some emotions soften after quiet. Some decisions become obvious only after the noise disappears. Your subconscious has always understood this. The conscious mind often forgets. Imagine ending each day with a simple message to yourself. Not, everything is perfect, because that may not be true. Not, I have everything figured out, because few people do, but something quieter. Something like, today is complete. Those 3 words carry remarkable peace. They tell your subconscious, the work of today can rest now. What remains will be handled when morning comes. When people speak about changing their lives, they usually imagine dramatic mornings, early alarms, new routines, powerful resolutions. But lasting transformation often begins in a much quieter place. A dark room, a calm breath, a peaceful mind willing to stop fighting the day. The world celebrates impressive beginnings. The subconscious quietly honors peaceful endings. And yet, there is one practice that makes these final minutes before sleep infinitely more powerful. One simple habit that gently reshapes your emotional landscape without force, without pretending, without endless effort. It is something your subconscious responds to almost immediately, not because it changes your circumstances, but because it changes what your mind begins expecting from life itself. Most people think of it as nothing more than good manners. They have no idea it is actually one of the most powerful ways to rewrite the stories their subconscious tells them every single night. And that hidden practice is where we are going next. Chapter 4. Gratitude Before Sleep. Teaching your mind what is worth keeping. There is a quiet habit that almost everyone misunderstands. Gratitude. Most people treat it like good manners. Something polite. Something you say after receiving a gift. A simple thank you. Then they move on. But your subconscious experiences gratitude very differently. It doesn't hear gratitude as politeness. It hears it as instruction. Every time you genuinely appreciate something, you quietly tell your subconscious, this matters. And whatever matters, the subconscious begins protecting, remembering, looking for. That is why gratitude is far more than a pleasant feeling. It is a way of training attention. And attention quietly becomes identity. Imagine walking through a vast forest with a basket in your hands. Scattered along the path are hundreds of objects. Some are beautiful. Some are broken. Some are ordinary. Some are painful. You cannot carry everything. So every evening, you choose what goes into your basket. That basket is your subconscious. The forest is your day. The question is not whether difficult things happened. The question is, what are you taking home? Most people unknowingly fill their basket with frustration. The delayed train, the rude stranger, the mistake at work, the awkward conversation, the unexpected expense. They replay these moments again and again. By bedtime, their basket is overflowing with emotional weight. Then they wonder why tomorrow feels heavier than today. Now imagine another traveler walking through the very same forest. They notice the same difficulties. They don't pretend the thorns aren't there. But before leaving, they also collect something else. A kind smile from a cashier, the warmth of sunlight through a window, a laugh shared with a friend. a problem they solved, a moment of unexpected peace. The day was never perfect, but neither was it empty. The difference wasn't reality. The difference was selection. Your subconscious never stores the entire day equally. It quietly asks, what seemed important to you? And one of the clearest ways you answer that question is through gratitude, not forced gratitude, not pretending life is wonderful when it isn't, but honest appreciation for what is still good, even on difficult days, especially on difficult days, because gratitude does not deny pain. It refuses to let pain become the only story. Think about two gardeners. Both receive identical plots of land. Both experience storms. Both pull weeds. Both lose a few plants. But one gardener spends every morning looking only at what failed. Every dead leaf becomes proof that nothing grows. The other notices the weeds, then quietly waters what is still alive. Months later, one garden is nearly empty. The other slowly begins to bloom. Neither escaped difficulty. One simply invested attention differently. Your inner world grows the same way. There's a reason your mind naturally remembers embarrassment more vividly than ordinary moments. Long ago, paying attention to danger helped human beings survive. The mind became skilled at asking, what could go wrong? That instinct is still with you. But modern life creates a strange problem. Most of the dangers your mind reacts to today cannot be solved by worry. A delayed email, an awkward meeting, someone who ignored your message, a mistake you made weeks ago. Your subconscious often treats these emotional discomforts as if they were wild animals waiting outside your door. Gratitude gently reminds the mind, we are safe enough to notice something else. Picture a photographer walking through a city. They carry the same camera every day, yet every photograph looks different. Why? Because they decide where to point the lens. One photographer will spend the afternoon capturing cracked sidewalks, broken windows, gray skies. Another notices children laughing, beautiful architecture, golden evening light. Both walk through the same streets. Their collections become completely different memories. Attention quietly creates experience. Gratitude changes the direction of the lens. This is why grateful people are not blind to hardship. They simply refuse to become photographers who only document darkness. They understand something many people never discover. Whatever you repeatedly notice becomes emotionally familiar, and whatever becomes familiar slowly begins feeling normal. If disappointment becomes your normal, hope feels unrealistic. If appreciation becomes your normal, joy no longer feels like an accident. Imagine entering your home every evening carrying invisible paint. Whatever color you choose, you slowly cover the walls. One brushstroke seems insignificant, another barely noticeable. Months later, you look around. The entire room reflects years of tiny decisions. Your subconscious works exactly like that. No single grateful thought transforms your life, but thousands of them quietly repaint the emotional atmosphere you live inside every day. Perhaps you've met someone who always notices what is missing. The food could have been better. The weather should have improved. The holiday ended too soon. The promotion wasn't large enough. Nothing ever feels complete. At first, it seems like personality. Look closer, it is often habit. Their subconscious has become trained to scan for absence. Eventually, even abundance feels invisible, because the mind finds what it has practiced finding. Now think of someone whose presence immediately feels peaceful, not because they have an easier life, but because they notice things other people overlook. The taste of warm tea, the comfort of familiar music, a meaningful conversation, the quiet satisfaction of finishing ordinary work. Their peace isn't accidental. It has been rehearsed, little by little, one unnoticed blessing at a time. There is a beautiful irony here. The more you appreciate what already exists, the less your happiness depends on what doesn't. That doesn't mean you stop pursuing dreams. It means your dreams stop holding your peace hostage. You no longer say, "I'll finally be happy when." Instead, you quietly learn, "I can build happiness while I'm becoming." Your subconscious responds differently to those two lives. One is always waiting. The other is already living. Consider a child learning to walk. Every few steps, they fall. Yet, loving parents rarely focus on the fall. They celebrate the attempt. Imagine if every evening you became that kind of parent toward yourself. Instead of asking, "What did I fail to do?" you gently asked, "What deserves appreciation today?" Perhaps you remained calm during a difficult conversation. Perhaps you showed kindness when nobody noticed. Perhaps you simply got out of bed on a day when everything felt heavy. Progress deserves recognition before perfection ever arrives. The subconscious remembers how you speak to yourself. If every evening ends with criticism, it slowly concludes, "No matter what we accomplish, it is never enough." Eventually, success feels strangely empty. Achievements arrive. Satisfaction doesn't, because the finish line keeps moving. Gratitude interrupts that endless race. Very few wish they had complained more. Very few regret appreciating ordinary mornings, or quiet conversations, or simple meals. Perspective changes value. Gratitude gives you that perspective now, instead of waiting decades to discover it. Now imagine your subconscious as an archivist inside an enormous museum. Every evening, it receives hundreds of experiences. It cannot display them all. So it asks, which ones deserve the main exhibition? When you revisit resentment repeatedly, it assumes resentment belongs in the center of the museum. When you revisit gratitude, it quietly moves different memories under the spotlight. Eventually, those become the stories your identity is built upon. This doesn't erase painful memories, nor should it. Pain often teaches wisdom, but wisdom and bitterness are not the same thing. One carries lessons, the other carries chains. Gratitude helps separate the two. It keeps the lesson while loosening the chain. That may be one of its greatest gifts. Perhaps this is why grateful people often appear lighter, not because they carry less, because they carry differently. Imagine two travelers with identical luggage. One balances the weight carefully. The other drags every suitcase behind them. The contents are the same. The experience is completely different. Gratitude changes how emotional weight is carried, not by removing reality, but by restoring balance. And there is something even more surprising. Your subconscious begins expecting what it repeatedly appreciates, not expecting in the sense of entitlement, expecting in the sense of awareness. If every evening you quietly notice kindness, you begin recognizing kindness everywhere. If you repeatedly notice beauty, beauty becomes easier to find, not because the world transformed overnight, because your inner lens quietly adjusted. The photographer changed, so the pictures changed. This is why gratitude before sleep is not about forcing yourself to smile. Some evenings are painful. Some seasons are genuinely difficult. Gratitude during those moments may be as simple as appreciating one steady breath, one loyal friend, one lesson learned, one chance to begin again tomorrow. Tiny things count, especially when life feels heavy. The subconscious rarely measures size. It measures sincerity. As the room grows quiet and your day begins fading into memory, imagine placing 3 small treasures into your subconscious before sleep. Not because someone told you to, because those treasures deserve another day of life inside you. Perhaps one memory, one person, one moment of courage. Then allow everything else to settle. Not solved, simply set down. There's extraordinary peace in deciding what deserves another night of attention. But there's one mistake that quietly destroys this practice for countless people. A mistake so subtle, most never realize they are making it. They believe changing the subconscious is about adding more positive thoughts, when the real obstacle has been something entirely different, something hidden much deeper than thought itself. It is the invisible collection of beliefs you accepted years ago, beliefs that still shape your nights, your mornings, and every decision in between. before you can rewrite your subconscious, you must first uncover the stories it has been protecting all along. And that is exactly where we're going next. Chapter 5. The Invisible Stories Running Your Life. Have you ever noticed two people can experience the exact same event, yet walk away believing completely different things? One person hears criticism and thinks, I still have more to learn. Another hears the same criticism and quietly concludes, I'll never be enough. The words were identical. The voices sounded the same. The moment lasted only a few seconds. Yet the meaning became completely different. That is because your life is shaped less by what happens to you and more by the story your subconscious creates afterward. Most people spend years trying to change their circumstances without ever questioning the storyteller living inside them. Imagine watching a film in a cinema. Halfway through, the projector begins placing a blue filter over every scene. The actors haven't changed. The dialogue hasn't changed. The story hasn't changed. Yet suddenly, everything feels colder, more distant, more hopeless. The audience assumes the world inside the film has changed. It hasn't. Only the lens has. Your subconscious carries invisible filters like these every day. They quietly color every experience before you consciously understand it. That is why two people can receive the same opportunity. One immediately thinks, this could change my life. The other whispers, I'll probably fail. Neither response appeared from nowhere. Both were written by stories that began long before this opportunity arrived. Most of those stories were never consciously chosen. They were inherited, collected, repeated, until they became invisible. As a child, you did not have the ability to question everything you heard. If someone important repeatedly told you, you are careless, you didn't stop to ask whether it was true. You simply accepted it. If you were praised only when you achieved something, your subconscious may have quietly learned, my worth depends on performance. If your emotions were ignored, perhaps another story appeared. My feelings don't matter. Years passed. The people disappeared. The words faded, but the stories remained. Think of wet cement. While it is still soft, every footprint leaves a mark. Once it hardens, the marks become part of the surface. Childhood is often like wet cement. Small moments, repeated often enough, leave surprisingly deep impressions. Not because children are weak, because they are wonderfully open. The subconscious is still asking, what kind of world is this? What kind of person am I? What should I expect from life? Whatever answers appear repeatedly become the foundation. The remarkable thing is, those stories rarely announce themselves. They don't introduce themselves every morning. They simply begin finishing your sentences. I could never. People always. I've never been good at. This is just who I am. Notice how certain those statements sound. Not because they have been proven, because they have been repeated. Repetition quietly disguises belief as fact. Imagine wearing a name tag every day that says, shy. Eventually, people begin treating you like a shy person. You begin expecting yourself to behave that way. Soon, the label becomes stronger than the person wearing it. Subconscious beliefs work much the same way. Once you accept a label, your behavior begins protecting it. Not because the label is true, because consistency feels safe. Safety is one of the subconscious mind's greatest priorities. Not happiness, not success, familiarity. This surprises many people. They assume the subconscious wants them to thrive. In reality, it first wants them to survive. And from its perspective, what is familiar usually feels safer than what is unknown, even when familiar is painful. Have you ever wondered why someone stays in a relationship that constantly hurts them, or remains in a job they secretly dislike, or repeats the same destructive habits year after year? At first, it feels unnatural. The old route still calls to you. Your subconscious works exactly like that. Old beliefs become well-worn pathways. New beliefs feel awkward, not because they are wrong, because they are new. This explains why genuine change often feels uncomfortable. Suppose you spent years believing, "I'm always the one people ignore." Then someone sincerely compliments you. Instead of accepting it, you dismiss it. They're just being polite. Why? Because the compliment doesn't fit your existing story. The subconscious protects a familiar narrative. Even positive experiences may be rejected if they don't match the identity it already recognizes. Imagine carrying a map that was printed 20 years ago. Roads have changed. Cities have grown. Bridges have been built. Yet every journey still follows the outdated map. Eventually, you blame the world for feeling confusing, not realizing the map was never updated. Many subconscious beliefs are emotional maps drawn during earlier chapters of life. The landscape changed. The map didn't. Perhaps someone betrayed your trust years ago. Your subconscious quietly wrote, "People can't be trusted." Later, you meet someone kind, loyal, patient, yet part of you remains distant. Not because this person earned suspicion, because your map still says, "Danger ahead." The subconscious would rather be unnecessarily cautious than unexpectedly hurt. That instinct once protected you. Now, it may be limiting you. Notice something important. The subconscious is rarely trying to sabotage you. It is trying to protect the version of reality it believes exists. Imagine a smoke alarm that becomes overly sensitive. It rings while you're making toast. It rings during harmless steam from the shower. The alarm isn't malicious. It simply learned to react too quickly. Many limiting beliefs function exactly like that. Protection continues, long after genuine danger has disappeared. This is why fighting your beliefs rarely works. Imagine shouting at the smoke alarm, calling it stupid, demanding it stop making noise. Nothing changes. Instead, you gently adjust the settings. Your subconscious responds better to gentle correction than violent resistance. Lasting change usually feels more like updating than battling. Think about a museum filled with ancient paintings. Some are masterpieces. Others no longer reflect reality. Yet they remain hanging on the walls, simply because no one questioned them. Your subconscious contains a museum like this. Old beliefs, old assumptions, old emotional conclusions. Some still deserve their place. Others became outdated long ago. But until you walk through the museum, you never notice which paintings no longer belong. One of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself is surprisingly simple. Who taught me this? Not, is this true? Not yet. Begin with, where did this story come from? Perhaps you discover it wasn't your voice at all. Perhaps it belonged to a stressed parent, a frustrated teacher, an insecure friend. Someone else's fear became your certainty. Realizing that changes everything, because borrowed beliefs can be returned. Imagine inheriting an old suitcase from a relative. You've carried it for years. One day, you finally open it. Inside are clothes that don't fit, letters written to someone else, objects you never chose. You suddenly realize you've been carrying another person's belongings. Many emotional stories are inherited in the same way. Without opening the suitcase, you assume everything inside belongs to you. This is where compassion becomes essential. Many people discover old subconscious stories, then immediately attack themselves. Why am I like this? I should have known better. But imagine criticizing a child for believing what you wouldn't. You would understand. The subconscious learned honestly. It simply never received new instructions. That realization replaces shame with curiosity, and curiosity opens doors that shame keeps locked. Perhaps your story says, I must earn love, or I always disappoint people. Maybe it whispers, I'll never have enough, or I'm too late. Whatever the story, notice something fascinating. It has probably influenced hundreds of decisions without introducing itself once. The subconscious rarely announces its beliefs. It simply turns them into behavior. Imagine wearing tinted glasses for 30 years. Eventually, you stop noticing the color. It simply becomes reality. When someone else describes a world differently, you assume they are mistaken, not realizing they are seeing without the lens you've forgotten you're wearing. Self-awareness begins the moment you notice the glasses, not when you throw them away, simply when you see them. And here's the beautiful part. The moment a subconscious story becomes visible, it loses some of its power. Invisible stories control us. Visible stories invite examination. You begin asking, does this belief still deserve to guide my life? That single question creates space. Space between you and the story. Space where change quietly begins. But awareness alone is not enough. Imagine discovering an old script for a theater play. You realize you've been reading the wrong line for years. Knowing that is important. Yet, tomorrow night, the audience still arrives. The curtain still rises. You still need a new script. The subconscious cannot simply erase an old story. It needs something stronger to replace it. Something believable. Something repeated. Something lived. That is where most people stop. They identify their limiting beliefs, but never learn how to gently rewrite them. They remove the old map without drawing a new one. They tear down an old house without building another. Nature dislikes empty spaces, so the subconscious quietly rebuilds a familiar pattern, unless you consciously give it a better one. And that brings us to perhaps the most important discovery of this entire journey. Because there's a surprisingly simple way to begin writing new stories into the subconscious, one that doesn't rely on force or endless positive thinking, but on something your mind has been responding to since childhood. It is a forgotten art of mental rehearsal, and once you understand how it truly works, you will never close your eyes in quite the same way again. Chapter 6, Mental Rehearsal, Becoming Tomorrow's You Before Tomorrow Arrives. Long before an action becomes visible, it usually exists as a picture, not on paper, not on a screen, inside the quiet theater of your mind. Every day, whether you notice it or not, you are rehearsing. You rehearse tomorrow's conversation while driving home. You rehearse arguments that haven't happened. You rehearse embarrassing moments before they occur. You rehearse failure without ever calling it rehearsal. Then, when life unfolds in a familiar way, you assume it was reality shaping your thoughts. Sometimes, your thoughts quietly shape the reality first. Imagine standing backstage before play begins. The curtains are still closed. The audience hasn't arrived. Nothing has happened yet, but the actors already know where to stand, when to speak, how to move. They have practiced the performance so many times that their bodies no longer hesitate. Now imagine walking into an important meeting tomorrow, or making a difficult phone call, or introducing yourself to someone new. Wouldn't it make sense to rehearse that performance too? Strangely, most people already do. The only difference is they rehearse disaster. Think about the last time you worried before an important event. Perhaps you imagined forgetting your words, making a mistake, being judged, feeling embarrassed. Notice what happened. Your body reacted immediately. Your heart beat faster. Your breathing changed. Your muscles became tense. Nothing had actually happened, yet your body quietly prepared for the story your mind was telling. That should make you pause, because your subconscious responds remarkably well to imagined experiences. It listens to vivid inner pictures almost as carefully as it listens to real ones. This explains why anxiety can feel so convincing. The mind becomes an incredibly talented movie director. It creates scenes, adds dialogue, predicts outcomes, builds emotional soundtracks. Then the subconscious watches a film and prepares for it. The tragedy is not that imagination exists. The tragedy is that many people use one of their greatest gifts almost exclusively to rehearse fear. Imagine owning the world's finest paintbrush, yet using it only to paint storms. Every canvas becomes darker. Every horizon becomes gray. Eventually, you conclude the world itself has no color, not realizing the brush was always in your own hand. Imagination works the same way. It is not naturally positive, nor naturally negative. It simply creates. The direction depends on the artist holding it. When you were a child, you probably imagined extraordinary things. A cardboard box became a spaceship. A stick became a sword. An empty room became an entire kingdom. Your imagination built worlds effortlessly. Somewhere along the journey into adulthood, many people stopped imagining possibilities. They became experts at imagining problems instead. The ability never disappeared. Only its direction changed. Here is something fascinating. The subconscious does not become stronger because you think harder. It becomes stronger because you think more vividly. There is a difference. Repeating empty words rarely changes much. But creating a clear emotional experience inside your mind, that leaves an impression. Your subconscious remembers experiences far more easily than lectures. It understands stories, pictures, feelings, movement. That is why mental rehearsal feels so natural. It speaks the subconscious language. Imagine a violin resting inside its case. If nobody touches it for years, the music remains silent, not because the violin is broken, because unused abilities remain asleep. Confidence is often like that. It already exists in potential. Mental rehearsal quietly begins tuning the instrument before anyone hears the first note. Suppose tomorrow you need to have a difficult conversation. Most people rehearse everything going wrong. They picture rejection, awkward silence, conflict, failure. Then they arrive emotionally exhausted before the conversation even begins. Imagine choosing something different, not pretending everything will be perfect. Simply rehearsing yourself remaining calm, listening carefully, speaking honestly, responding thoughtfully. After many meetings, comfort naturally grows. Your future self is also a stranger, patient, disciplined, calm, focused. If you never spend time meeting that version of yourself, your subconscious keeps returning to the older identity it already knows, not because it dislikes growth, because familiarity always feels safer. Imagine moving into a new home. The first night feels strange. You bump into furniture. You forget where things are. But after enough time, the unfamiliar house becomes home. Mental rehearsal allows your subconscious to quietly move into your future identity before your outer life fully reflects it. Night after night, the new home becomes less intimidating. Eventually, it simply feels like where you belong. This is why athletes are not the only people who benefit from rehearsal. Parents rehearse difficult conversations with their children. Musicians rehearse performances. Teachers rehearse lessons. Doctors mentally walk through procedures. Even without realizing it, you rehearse ordinary life every day. Driving familiar route, preparing tomorrow's schedule, remembering someone's face. The subconscious has always learned through repetition. Mental rehearsal simply makes that repetition intentional. Now, consider something many people overlook. Your subconscious cannot easily separate identity from behavior. If you repeatedly imagine yourself acting with patience, you begin expecting patience from yourself. If you repeatedly imagine yourself responding calmly under pressure, calmness slowly feels less foreign. You are not hypnotizing yourself. You are becoming emotionally acquainted with a different version of who you can be. Think of an architect. Before a single brick is laid, the building already exists, not physically, mentally. Every room has been imagined, every doorway considered, every window placed with purpose. Construction simply follows the blueprint. Most people attempt the opposite. They begin building first, then wonder why the structure feels unstable. Your subconscious also needs a blueprint. Without one, it continues rebuilding yesterday. Perhaps you've noticed how quickly the mind imagines failure, one unanswered message, and suddenly you imagine rejection, one mistake at work, and you imagine losing everything, one difficult day, and your imagination predicts a difficult life. The imagination itself isn't the problem. The problem is allowing only fear to use it. Imagine if hope received equal creative attention, not fantasy, possibility. Picture a farmer preparing a field. Before planting, the soil must first be softened. Mental rehearsal softens the emotional ground. When real opportunities arrive, the subconscious no longer sees them as completely unfamiliar. Instead, it quietly whispers, "We've been here before." That feeling changes behavior more than people realize. There is another hidden truth. The subconscious loves detail. Imagine someone saying, "I want a better life." Mental rehearsal gently works with this natural ability. The more vivid your inner experience, the more familiar it gradually becomes. But here is where many people unknowingly make a mistake. They rehearse perfection. No setbacks, no discomfort, no uncertainty. Real life doesn't work that way. Your subconscious recognizes authenticity. Instead, rehearse resilience. Picture challenges appearing, and yourself responding differently. Not because life becomes easier, because you become steadier. That is far more believable and far more powerful. Imagine learning to sail. The goal isn't eliminating wind. The goal is learning to work with it. Likewise, mental rehearsal is not about imagining a world without storms. It is about imagining yourself becoming someone who knows how to navigate them. Identity matters more than circumstance. Always, there's a quiet confidence that grows from this practice, not loud confidence, not arrogance, the kind that says, "I don't know exactly what tomorrow holds, but I know who I intend to be when it arrives." That sentence alone changes the emotional atmosphere of tomorrow. Your subconscious begins preparing for character rather than outcome. Character remains within your influence. Outcomes often don't. As evening approaches, imagine closing your eyes for just a few moments, not escaping reality, preparing for it. Picture yourself moving through tomorrow with patience, responding thoughtfully, listening before reacting, keeping promises to yourself. Not because every moment unfolds perfectly, but because your inner compass remains steady. Night after night, these quiet rehearsals begin introducing your subconscious to someone it has never fully met. The future version of you, not imagined because it is impossible, imagined because it is becoming familiar. And then, something remarkable begins happening. You stop feeling like you are pretending. You stop forcing every decision. Certain responses begin arriving naturally, almost automatically. You wonder, when did I become this person? The answer is rarely dramatic. It happened during hundreds of quiet evenings, when nobody was watching, when the rehearsal slowly became reality. Yet there is one final piece missing, perhaps the most overlooked piece of all. You can rehearse a new identity. You can plant better emotional patterns. You can guide your subconscious before sleep. But every morning, the world immediately begins speaking to you again. People's opinions, social media, unexpected setbacks, old environments, old habits. The question becomes, how do you protect the new subconscious patterns before they become strong enough to stand on their own? Because reprogramming the subconscious is not only about what you plant, it is also about what you refuse to keep watering. And that hidden truth will change the way you look at your mornings forever. Chapter 7. Guarding your mind after you wake. protecting the new programming. There's a quiet mistake that undoes months of inner work. And most people make it before they even leave their bed. The alarm rings. Your eyes slowly open. For one brief moment, your mind is calm. The world has not fully arrived yet. There is no conversation, no pressure, no deadlines. Just a few quiet seconds where yesterday has ended and today has not completely begun. Then, without thinking, your hand reaches for your phone. A message, a headline, an email, a social media post, someone else's opinion, someone else's emergency, someone else's success. Within moments, your mind is no longer your own. The world has entered before you had the chance to enter your own day, and the subconscious quietly begins taking notes. Think about a freshly planted garden. The seeds are there. The soil has been prepared. Water has been given. But imagine opening the gate every morning and allowing anyone to walk across it. Some visitors are careful. Others step directly on the new shoots before they have time to grow. Would you blame the seeds for failing? Or would you question the gate? Your subconscious works the same way. New beliefs are delicate, not weak, just young. They need protection before they become strong enough to survive the storms of ordinary life. Most people believe mornings are about productivity. Wake up earlier, exercise faster, drink coffee sooner, answer emails immediately. But perhaps mornings are not primarily about productivity. Perhaps they are about protection, because whatever enters your mind first often becomes emotional background music for everything that follows. One frightening headline can quietly color an entire day. One thoughtful moment can do exactly the same. The difference is rarely the event itself. It is what entered first. Imagine pouring clear water into a glass. Before drinking it, someone adds one drop of dark ink. The glass is no longer completely clear, not because the ink was powerful, because it arrived first. Your early thoughts work similarly. They create the emotional tone through which the rest of the day is experienced. That is why the first few minutes after waking deserve far more respect than they usually receive. Have you ever noticed how one small irritation in the morning seems to follow you for hours? You spill coffee, miss the train, receive an impatient email. Suddenly, everything else feels heavier. The mind quietly begins collecting evidence that today is a bad day. Not because every event is bad, because your subconscious has already chosen the story it expects to find. Once a story begins, the mind becomes remarkably skilled at proving itself right. Picture someone wearing red-tinted glasses. They walk through a beautiful garden. The flowers are colorful. The sky is bright. Yet everything appears touched by red. The world has not changed. Only the lens has. Your first emotional experience after waking often becomes that lens. If irritation arrives first, patience becomes harder to notice. If gratitude arrives first, possibilities become easier to recognize. Your subconscious does not simply react to your day. It quietly interprets it. This is why protecting your mornings is not selfish. It is responsible. Imagine a pilot preparing for takeoff. Would they allow random strangers into the cockpit while setting the flight path? Of course not. Too much depends on those first moments. Your subconscious deserves the same level of care. Before the world tells you who to be, spend a few moments remembering who you have decided to become. That single habit changes the direction of the entire day. There's something interesting about fresh snow. Before anyone walks across it, its surface is untouched. Then one person takes a step. Another follows. Soon, a path appears. By afternoon, everyone naturally follows the same trail. Your mind after waking is similar. The first thoughts become the first footsteps. Later thoughts often follow those early tracks. Choose them carefully. Photos, achievements, vacations, businesses, relationships, perfect moments carefully chosen for public display. Then they wonder why their own ordinary morning suddenly feels small. Comparison rarely destroys peace all at once. It quietly steals appreciation before the day has even begun. Imagine visiting a museum. Instead of enjoying each painting, you spend the entire visit asking why your own home doesn't look like this. Eventually, You stop seeing beauty altogether. Comparison trains the subconscious to overlook what already exists. It teaches the mind to scan for absence instead of abundance. Night after night, morning after morning, that habit quietly becomes identity. Now imagine waking differently, not with urgency, not with panic, simply with awareness. You sit quietly for 1 minute. You notice your breathing. You remember one thing you appreciated before sleep. You gently remind yourself of the person you practiced becoming last night. No grand ceremony, no dramatic ritual, just a quiet continuation. Sleep planted the seed. Morning protects it. Think of a blacksmith shaping steel. The metal is heated, then cooled, then heated again. Transformation is not one dramatic moment. It is repeated care. Your subconscious develops the same way. The evening prepares. The morning reinforces. Each day strengthens what the previous night introduced. Eventually, character replaces effort. People often ask why new habits disappear so quickly. The answer is sometimes surprisingly simple. The environment stayed stronger than the intention. Imagine trying to light a candle in the middle of a storm. The flame is real. The wind is simply stronger. Protect the flame for a while, and eventually it becomes steady enough to withstand the breeze. Your new subconscious patterns deserve that same patience. Environment speaks constantly. A cluttered room, constant noise, negative conversations, endless notifications. Each one quietly influences the emotional climate around you. You may believe you are choosing your thoughts. Often, your surroundings are choosing them first. That realization is not discouraging. It is freeing, because environments can be changed, little by little. Suppose every morning begins with the television shouting bad news. Imagine hearing arguments before breakfast, urgency before calm, fear before hope. The subconscious quietly concludes, this is what mornings feel like. Now replace that environment with silence, soft music, a journal, fresh air through an open window. The external world changed only slightly. The internal experience changes dramatically. There's another invisible influence. The people whose voices you hear most often, not because they intend to shape you, simply because repeated voices become familiar. Imagine spending every morning with someone who constantly complains. Eventually, you begin noticing more things worth complaining about. Spend every morning with someone deeply curious, and your own curiosity quietly grows. The subconscious absorbs atmosphere as naturally as lungs absorb air. This doesn't mean avoiding difficult people forever. Life doesn't work that way. But it does mean choosing what enters your mind before the world begins making demands. The strongest tree still began as a protected seedling. Strength came later. Protection came first. Perhaps the most powerful morning question is not if you know who you intend to be. Patience, kindness, discipline, honesty. The day's circumstances become less frightening. The compass remains steady even when the landscape changes. There is a beautiful simplicity to this. You don't need perfect mornings. You don't need 2 uninterrupted hours before sunrise. Life is often messy. Children wake early. Phones ring. Schedules shift. The goal isn't perfection. It is intention. Even 60 quiet seconds can remind your subconscious, we are not beginning from yesterday's fears. We are continuing the person we practice becoming. That small reminder matters more than it appears. Imagine an artist protecting fresh paint. They don't immediately stack heavy boxes against the canvas. They give it time to dry. Your subconscious deserves the same respect. New beliefs need breathing space. New identities need repetition. New emotional habits need ordinary mornings where they are simply allowed to exist, without constant interruption, without immediate criticism, without rushing to prove themselves. And then, one morning arrives when something feels different. A situation that once triggered panic now receives patience. A criticism that once ruined your day now becomes information. A delay that once created frustration now becomes a moment to breathe. You may not even notice the exact day it happened. Growth rarely announces itself. It quietly becomes your new normal. That is how real transformation usually appears. Not as fireworks, not as a dramatic breakthrough, but as a collection of moments where you surprise yourself. I handled that differently. I stayed calmer. I didn't react the way I used to. The subconscious has slowly rewritten the script, not because you forced it, because you consistently protected it. Yet there is one question that still remains, perhaps the most important question of all. How do you know whether your subconscious is actually changing? How can you tell the difference between temporary enthusiasm and genuine inner transformation? Because the subconscious rarely announces its progress with loud victories. Instead, it leaves behind subtle signs, quiet clues that most people completely overlook. Once you learn to recognize them, you will never doubt your progress again. And those hidden signs are exactly where our journey leads next. Chapter 8. The quiet signs your subconscious is changing. Most people expect transformation to feel dramatic. They imagine waking up one morning, feeling completely different. Fear disappears. Confidence arrives. Old habits vanish. Life suddenly becomes effortless. But the subconscious almost never changes that way. It changes like the seasons, so gradually that you don't notice the day spring became summer. One morning, you simply realize the air feels different. Real transformation often arrives with the same quietness. That is why so many people believe they are making no progress, when in reality, the deepest changes have already begun. Imagine watching a tree every single day for an entire year. At first, nothing seems to happen. The branches look the same. The trunk appears unchanged. You begin wondering whether the tree is growing at all. Then, imagine leaving for 12 months. When you return, the difference is undeniable. Growth was happening every day. It was simply too quiet to notice from one sunrise to the next. Your subconscious develops in exactly the same way. Daily changes are nearly invisible. Monthly changes become impossible to ignore. This creates a strange problem. People measure the wrong things. They ask, do I feel completely confident yet? Have all my fears disappeared? Am I perfectly disciplined now? Those questions expect perfection. The subconscious works in progress. A wiser question is, what feels slightly easier than it used to? That is where real evidence lives. In the small shifts, not the dramatic ones. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack every day. At first, every step feels exhausting. Then, little by little, your body grows stronger. The backpack hasn't become lighter. You have become different. One afternoon, you suddenly realize this doesn't feel as difficult anymore. That moment matters. Not because the world changed, because you did. Many subconscious changes first appear this way. Life looks similar. You respond differently. Perhaps 6 months ago, someone ignored your message. You spent the entire day wondering what you had done wrong. Your mind invented stories. You replayed conversations. You questioned your worth. Now imagine the same thing happening today. You notice the silence. You feel a little uncomfortable. Then you continue living your day. That tiny difference may seem ordinary. It isn't. It is evidence. The subconscious has quietly loosened an old emotional pattern. Think about learning to swim. In the beginning, every movement demands attention. You worry about breathing, balancing, staying afloat. Eventually, something changes. You stop thinking about swimming. You simply swim. The skill disappears into your subconscious. Emotional growth often follows the same path. The reactions that once required enormous effort eventually become natural, not because you are forcing yourself, because the subconscious has learned a new way. There is a hidden sign that many people completely overlook: the pause. Imagine someone says something that once would have made you angry. In the past, you reacted immediately. Words escaped before thought. Now, there's half a second of silence, just enough space to choose. That tiny pause is one of the clearest signs your subconscious is changing, because automatic reactions are becoming conscious decisions. Freedom often begins inside one quiet breath. Picture a rushing river. For years, the water followed the same path. Fast, predictable, powerful. Then someone gently creates a new channel. At first, only a few drops move differently. Eventually, more water follows. One day, the river itself has changed direction. Your habits transform in much the same way. The first pause is only a few drops. Over time, it becomes a river. Another quiet sign appears in your conversations. You begin listening more than defending. You become curious instead of immediately offended. You stop needing to win every disagreement. Not because you have become passive, because your identity no longer feels threatened by every different opinion. That is emotional strength, not silence, not submission. Security. The subconscious has stopped interpreting every disagreement as danger. Have you ever noticed how children ask endless questions? Everything fascinates them. As people grow older, many replace curiosity with certainty. They assume they already know themselves. I've always been impatient. I've never been creative. I'll always struggle. Then something beautiful happens as the subconscious changes. Curiosity returns. Instead of saying, "This is who I am," you quietly ask, "Who else might I become?" That single question opens doors that certainty keeps locked. Imagine walking through an old house you've lived in for years. One day, sunlight enters through a different window. Suddenly, you notice details that were always there. Dust dancing in the light, beautiful wood beneath faded paint, patterns you had never seen. Nothing new was added. Awareness simply arrived. The subconscious changes this way too. You begin noticing habits you once performed automatically. Not because they suddenly appeared, because you finally see them. Awareness is often the first gift of transformation. One of the most surprising signs of growth is what no longer attracts you. Perhaps endless drama begins feeling exhausting. Constant gossip becomes uninteresting. Arguments lose their strange appeal. You no longer enjoy proving people wrong. At first, you wonder what happened. The answer is simple. Your subconscious has changed its appetite. Just as someone recovering from illness gradually desires healthy food again, a healthier mind quietly hungers for healthier emotional experiences. Think about cleaning an old window. At first, almost nothing seems different. Yet eventually, a face appears, then expression, then beauty. The sculptor never doubted the process, simply because progress looked small. Your subconscious deserves the same patience. Transformation rarely announces itself with applause. Perhaps someone compliments you. Months ago, you immediately dismissed it. They're just being nice. Now, you smile, say thank you, and continue the conversation. That simple acceptance reveals something remarkable. The subconscious is no longer rejecting evidence that contradicts the old story. You are allowing new experiences to belong to you. That is how identity expands. There's another sign. You recover faster, not because sadness disappears, not because disappointment never visits, because you no longer unpack your bags and build a house inside every painful emotion. You feel, you reflect, you heal, then you continue walking. Resilience is not avoiding storms. It is remembering their weather, not permanent climate. Imagine holding a snow globe. Shake it violently, the water becomes cloudy. Set it down, the particles slowly settle. You didn't force the water to become clear. You simply stopped shaking it. Many people spend years shaking their own minds with endless overthinking. As the subconscious changes, you begin trusting stillness. Clarity quietly returns on its own. One day, someone asks how you've changed. You struggle to answer, not because nothing happened, because the changes became part of you. You no longer remember exactly when patience arrived, or confidence, or emotional balance. The new identity feels natural, like learning your native language. You stopped noticing the process long ago. You simply speak. That is one of the most beautiful moments on this journey, when the person you once practiced becoming becomes a person introducing themselves to the world every day, without pretending, without effort, without constant reminders. The subconscious has quietly accepted the new story. And yet, there remains one final misunderstanding that prevents countless people from experiencing lasting change. They believe reprogramming the subconscious is something you do once, then you're finished, as if the mind were a machine repaired forever. But the subconscious is much more like a living garden. Every single day, something is growing. The only question is, what? Because the greatest secret is not learning how to change your subconscious once. It is learning how to live in a way that keeps renewing it for the rest of your life. And that final discovery will change the way you think about personal growth forever. Chapter 9. The daily habits that keep reprogramming your mind. There is a belief that quietly stops many people from changing. It sounds reasonable, almost intelligent. It whispers, if I can just find the perfect technique, everything will finally change. So people search. A new book, a new method, a new morning routine, a new affirmation, a new meditation, a new shortcut. Yet months later, they often find themselves standing in the same place, not because the techniques failed, because they misunderstood something far more important. Your subconscious does not change because of extraordinary moments. It changes because of ordinary moments, repeated so consistently that they quietly become your way of living. Imagine filling a glass with water. You don't need a waterfall. You don't need a storm. One small drop at a time is enough. At first, the glass appears empty, then half full. Eventually, one final drop causes it to overflow. Most people notice only the last drop. They never appreciate the thousands that came before it. The subconscious works exactly the same way. Every repeated choice becomes another drop. Every small habit quietly fills a glass. Transformation often appears sudden, only because nobody was paying attention while it was slowly accumulating. Think about brushing your teeth. You probably don't celebrate it. You don't announce it to your friends. You don't expect one brushing session to transform your health. Yet imagine ignoring it for 5 years. Suddenly, its importance becomes obvious. The greatest habits often work this way. They are powerful precisely because they seem too ordinary to notice. The subconscious loves ordinary repetition. It quietly turns repeated behavior into permanent identity. Many people underestimate the power of tiny promises. Imagine telling yourself, I'll go for a 10-minute walk. Then keeping that promise. Tomorrow, you do it again. The walk itself matters. But something deeper is happening. Every kept promise whispers to the subconscious, we are someone who follows through. Notice, the walk lasts only minutes. The identity may last years. Now imagine the opposite. Every evening, you promise yourself you'll start tomorrow. Tomorrow arrives. You postpone again. Eventually, the subconscious learns another lesson. Our promises don't mean much. It doesn't become disappointed. It simply adjusts its expectations. Then one day, when you genuinely want to change, your own subconscious quietly hesitates. Not because it lacks faith in your potential, because your repeated behavior has taught it something different. Think of a child learning whom they can trust. If an adult repeatedly says, I'll be there at 5, and they always arrive at 7, the child eventually stops believing the words. The adult may have good intentions, but trust follows consistency. Your subconscious develops trust in exactly the same way, not through speeches, through evidence. Every small action becomes another piece of evidence about who you believe yourself to be. Imagine carrying a bucket to a well every morning. Some days, you feel energetic. Other days, you don't. Yet every morning, you still walk to the well. After enough time, nobody calls it discipline anymore. It simply becomes part of life. This is the hidden goal of subconscious change. Not forcing yourself forever, but making healthy choices feel familiar enough that they no longer require constant negotiation. Have you ever watched someone preparing bread? The dough doesn't rise because someone stares at it impatiently. It rises quietly, given the right conditions. The subconscious develops much the same way. Many people interrupt their own growth by constantly asking, is it working yet? Growth continues more peacefully when allowed to happen, without endless inspection. Patience is not passive. Patience is trust expressed over time. There is something beautiful about sunrise. It never arrives suddenly. The sky changes one gentle shade at a time. Dark blue, purple, orange, gold. Only later do people say, the sun is up. Subconscious transformation follows that same rhythm. Tiny emotional shifts, small behavioral changes, gentle adjustments in perspective. Then one ordinary day, you realize the light has already arrived. Think about language. You probably don't remember learning every single word you know. Nobody wakes up fluent after one afternoon. Thousands of conversations quietly build understanding. Identity grows the same way, not through one dramatic breakthrough, through countless ordinary experiences repeated until they become natural. The subconscious is remarkably patient. Perhaps we should learn to become patient with it. Imagine planting an apple tree. You water it today. Tomorrow, there are no apples. Would you dig it up to check whether it is growing? Of course not. Yet emotionally, people often do exactly that. They start a healthier habit. After 3 days, they wonder why they haven't become a different person. Real roots grow out of sight. Invisible work usually comes first. Visible results almost always arrive later. One of the quietest habits you can develop is paying attention to how you speak after making mistakes. Suppose you forget something important. One version of you says, "I'm so stupid." Another says, "I missed that. I'll handle it differently next time." The event lasted seconds. The emotional lesson may remain for years. The subconscious remembers your response long after it forgets the actual mistake. Imagine raising a young tree. Would you strike it every time the wind bent one branch? Or would you gently support it until it became stronger? Most people show more patience toward plants than toward themselves. Every mistake becomes another opportunity for self-criticism. Then they wonder why confidence struggles to grow. The subconscious blossoms in encouragement far more often than in punishment. Another habit quietly shapes your inner world. Finishing small things. Making the bed. A gardener doesn't wait for flowers before watering the soil. The watering comes first. Perhaps the most powerful habit of all is remembering that every day is another vote, not for perfection, for direction. Each choice quietly answers the same question. Who are we becoming? The subconscious listens carefully, not to your ambitions, to your votes. One vote changes little. Thousands create identity. Imagine standing before a giant stone wall. Every day, you remove one brick. The wall seems unchanged. Weeks later, a small opening appears. Months later, light begins passing through. One morning, you realize the wall that once defined your life no longer exists. Not because of one heroic effort, because of countless ordinary ones. That is how the subconscious transforms. Brick by brick, day by day, night by night. Eventually, you stop chasing transformation. You start living it. Not because every day feels extraordinary, because ordinary days have become enough. Your habits no longer feel like tasks. They feel like home. The person you hope to become quietly greets you in the mirror, without fanfare, without applause, simply as a natural result of how you have chosen to live. And yet, one final truth remains, perhaps the most comforting truth of this entire journey. What happens when you miss a day? When life becomes messy, when old habits briefly return, when discouragement quietly knocks on your door again, does all your progress disappear? Or has your subconscious learned something much more forgiving than most people ever imagine? The answer to that question may be the difference between giving up and continuing for the rest of your life. And it is the final lesson we must explore before this journey comes to its end. Chapter 10. The Night You Stop Becoming Someone Else. There's one final misunderstanding that quietly follows almost everyone who begins changing their life. It sounds hopeful, but it hides a subtle trap. It says, one day, I'll finally become the person I'm supposed to be. At first, that sounds inspiring, but look a little closer. Hidden inside those words is a dangerous assumption that the person you need to become exists somewhere outside you, somewhere in the future, somewhere waiting. And until you reach them, you are somehow incomplete. Your subconscious hears that story more often than you realize. It quietly concludes, "We are not enough yet." Then it spends years chasing a version of yourself that always seems one step ahead. Imagine spending your entire life running toward the horizon. No matter how fast you move, the horizon keeps moving too. Not because you're failing, because horizons are not destinations. They're perspectives. Many people treat personal growth the same way. They believe peace lives after the next promotion. Confidence waits behind the next achievement. Happiness arrives after the next relationship. Self-worth appears after enough success. Yet every destination quietly creates another destination. The chase never ends. Not because life is cruel, because the mind learned to postpone contentment. Picture a sculptor standing before a huge block of marble. Someone watching from a distance might think the sculptor is creating something completely new, but ask the sculptor, and they often describe the process differently. They don't create the statue. They reveal it. Everything unnecessary slowly falls away. Perhaps your subconscious has never been asking you to become someone else. Perhaps it has been patiently waiting for you to remove everything that never truly belonged to you. The fear, the borrowed beliefs, the unnecessary shame, the stories that were never yours. Think back to when you were very young, before someone told you what success looked like, before comparison became a daily habit, before you learned to measure yourself against everyone else. You were curious. You asked impossible questions. You laughed without wondering how you looked. You tried things simply because they interested you. You weren't perfect, but you were remarkably present. Somewhere along the way, layers accumulated. Expectations, labels, pressure, approval. The subconscious collected them faithfully. Now the work is not adding another layer. It is learning which layers can finally be set down. Imagine wearing a heavy winter coat during the middle of summer. At first, you assume the heat is simply part of life. Eventually, someone gently asks, "Why are you still wearing that?" You look down. You have forgotten it was there. Many emotional burdens are exactly like that. You became so accustomed to carrying them that they started feeling like your personality. Not because they belonged to you, because you wore them long enough to forget you could take them off. There is something beautifully ordinary about lasting transformation. It rarely arrives as one unforgettable moment. Instead, it appears in hundreds of tiny decisions. The day you choose not to replay an old argument. The morning you stop criticizing yourself before breakfast. The evening you close your eyes without carrying tomorrow's worries into bed. The conversation where you listen instead of defending. The mistake you forgive instead of turning into identity. None of these moments seem historic, yet together they quietly rewrite an entire life. Imagine weaving a blanket. One thread seems meaningless. Another thread changes very little, but continue weaving. Patiently, faithfully, eventually warmth appears. Your subconscious is woven the same way. Every repeated act of kindness toward yourself, every peaceful bedtime, every honest reflection, every kept promise becomes another thread. Years later, people admire the blanket. Very few appreciate the thousands of invisible movements that created it. There is a strange comfort in knowing this. You no longer need to transform overnight. You no longer need dramatic breakthroughs to prove you are growing. Growth becomes quieter, gentler, almost invisible, until one day, someone who hasn't seen you in years says, "You seem different." They may struggle to explain it. So might you, because the deepest changes rarely happen in your appearance. They happen in your presence. Presence is difficult to describe, yet everyone recognizes it. Some people walk into a room carrying urgency. Others carry calm. Some carry constant tension. Others carry quiet confidence. Often, the difference isn't intelligence, or money, or status. It is the emotional atmosphere their subconscious has practiced creating every single day. People don't just hear your words. They feel your inner world. Think about the ocean. On the surface, the waves constantly change. Some days are calm. Others are violent. Yet far below, the deeper water remains remarkably steady. Life will always create waves. Unexpected bills, disappointment, loss, success, celebration, conflict. The goal has never been eliminating the waves. The goal has always been strengthening the depth beneath them. That depth is where your subconscious quietly lives. Perhaps that is the greatest gift of this journey. Not controlling life. Learning not to be controlled by every moment inside it. Imagine becoming someone whose peace is no longer borrowed from circumstances, whose confidence no longer depends entirely upon praise, whose identity survives criticism, whose hope survives disappointment. Not because difficult emotions disappear, because they no longer become permanent addresses. They become passing weather. There is another truth worth remembering. The subconscious never demands perfection, only consistency. Imagine teaching a child to walk. Would you expect flawless balance after one afternoon? Of course not. The child falls, laughs, stands again, falls once more. Eventually, walking becomes ordinary. No celebration accompanies every step. The ability simply becomes part of life. Growth follows that same rhythm. Missing one evening does not erase hundreds before it. One difficult day does not destroy a patient mind. The subconscious is always learning the overall pattern, not judging one isolated moment. That realization removes an enormous weight. Many people abandon change because they miss one day. They skip one habit. They react emotionally once. They stay up too late. Immediately, the old voice returns. You've ruined everything. But imagine reading one difficult page in an otherwise beautiful novel. Would you throw away the entire book? Life deserves the same kindness. Return tomorrow. The subconscious remembers a direction far more than one imperfect step. Think about an old path through a forest. For years, everyone walked the same trail. Eventually, every ordinary habit is another vote. Every repeated thought is another seed. Every act of self-respect becomes another quiet instruction to the subconscious. Little by little, night after night, you are becoming the person your subconscious believes you are. And one day, without realizing exactly when it happened, you will wake up, look at the life you've patiently built, and understand something that once seemed impossible. You were never trying to create a completely new person. You were simply giving your truest self enough quiet nights, enough gentle repetition, and enough patient trust to finally come home. And tonight, when you close your eyes, remember this: your subconscious is already listening. The only question is, what beautiful story will you give it to carry into tomorrow?